and they're wondering whether or not the freshman requirement to live on campus could be waived so the siblings could room together off campus and be able to have some social distancing.
Sure, happy to answer that one. So, while we're not going to waive the living requirement for on campus, we do have an exception form. And so, if you would like to go to the housing website that's available there to be able to complete that exception, and one of the exceptions is living with family. So, please go to that housing website and complete that form.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. So let's go to Cynthia Hermann. Cynthia, we had a question about procedures at the on-site clinic, and what what do you have in place to safely treat and isolate potential COVID patients?
So we're doing lots of different things. We've never been closed the entire time. So we've been open the whole time, and we've had to adjust some of our processes as we go along. Whenever anyone calls in to schedule an appointment, they're being asked some screening questions to figure out exactly what type of appointment they need, and also to get them um, to see what their risk might be for having COVID. When folks come in, they are advised to bring their own face covering with them. We do have a nurse sitting in our rotunda who is again going over screening questions and taking people's temperature before they enter the clinic. If someone has a fever, they answer yes to some of those screening questions, or they tell the nurse that they have potentially been exposed to COVID. That person is set aside for just a second. The nurse comes down, gets them, and takes them up directly to the clinic through a back elevator so that they're not sitting in the reception area. They're not worrying about paying their copay or this or that. We kind of get them back, get them isolated very quickly. The medical provider comes in and assesses their symptoms, determine if they need testing or not. All of our staff have been trained on appropriate PPE. Masks are required in the clinic at all times for our staff, and we ask the students wear them as well whenever they come in. So I feel like we've been doing a really good job of staying on top of what we can to protect the health and safety of not only our students, but our staff working here at the Student Health and Wellness Center.
All right, thank you, Cynthia, appreciate that. I'm going to address one question that just came in, and it is the return to campus guide document that will be posted online, screen reader accessible? First of all, just to let you know, it will be posted at the Health Alerts site, and we're going to make it so that we can continue to update it. So if you go there versus downloading it and passing it around, you're going to see the latest document at all times, and our team will make it accessible. So they're aware of your request, and they'll make certain that happens. We're just in the final stages of editing it right now. So let's go to an academic related question, go back to the provost, Jennifer. Somebody asked the question, what is the purpose of switching to online after Thanksgiving if we have already been on campus?
The main reason for choosing to move to remote instruction after Thanksgiving, and this is a choice that many of our peer universities have made, is that we know that our students are going to be traveling, and some of them traveling significant distances. And some of those locations where they may be traveling to might be remote hotspots. And given that we only have 1 week of instruction and then final exams, it isn't practical for students to potentially self-isolate for that 2-week period. So we made the option to go ahead and move to remote instruction for that last bit of the academic semester. That way our students can stay put, or they can return back to their residence hall, whatever their choice is, but we're limiting the risk of potential spread of the virus on our campus during that time period.
All right, thank you. So the next question has to do with campus jobs. So maybe Elizabeth, would you like to take this one? And it has to do with how campus jobs for students are going to be handled, considering that they rely on the jobs for some income.
So we will have students working on campus again. So, and our hope is to have as many students working on campus as we can, as long as we can socially distance them. So pay attention to the Handshake website that's part of our Career Center, and they will have open positions. But the same process that we will have for faculty and staff on campus, we will have for students working in positions. And we anticipate that we likely will have some students telecommuting in the fall semester as well for their positions, if those positions allow for telecommuting. But the strongly encouraging masks, having social distance while they're in the office. And you saw some of the things that the operations committee is looking at, whether we need plexiglass in some of those areas. So all of those same conditions would apply for our students as well.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Let's go to Brandi for a question about quarantines. I know the safety committee has been spending a lot of time talking about quarantines, and this may also be something that Jennifer wants to weigh in on. But Brandi, one question specifically had to do with 14-day quarantines related to international students, and if international students might be handled differently. Do you want to talk about the whole reporting procedure, and maybe the provost would want to talk about anything related to the international students returning?
Sure, absolutely. So I see a lot of questions, and they're great questions around what do I do if I develop symptoms of COVID-19 or I test positive, or I may come in contact with someone that has tested positive. So I want to make sure I give you all the information for our COVID-19 hotline, and that can be reached. You can call there at any time. It's 844-366-5892. And we also have an email address as well, and that's simply covid@unt.edu. If you, student, faculty, staff member, anyone in our university community that's coming on site or is on site, if you experience any of those, or if you have employees that call you or students that call you and tell you that they have symptoms, we ask that you stay home and that you call the hotline to report it. From there, we have a team, some of my team members in risk management, as well as under Dr. Hermann's guidance in the medical center, work very closely together to begin the case investigation. And then they also work on our UNT or on-campus community contact tracing protocols from there. So that's kind of what starts happening behind the scenes as far as a reporting process. So it is really important that you do report. All of that information is kept confidential. Obviously, it's protected under medical information under HIPAA. So it's shared on a very limited basis. As far as individuals that need to self-isolate, Elizabeth, Dr. With talked about isolation spaces in the dorms. We also have some options for hoteling off campus if that's necessary as well. But the specific question around international students, I will let Dr. Cowley or Dr. With explain that process as the students start to come back from where they might be and get ready to come back on campus.
Absolutely. We will be reaching out to our international students and communicating to them about orientation and about procedures. We're asking anybody that has traveled internationally and is coming to our campus, such as visiting scholars and others, to be able to self-isolate and self-monitor for 14 days before coming on campus. And so we'll be providing those instructions to our international students as it gets closer to the start of campus.
Okay, thank you, Provost Cowley. Let's go back to the president for just a minute, because we have a question about financial assistance related to COVID for our students. And of course, we've talked a lot about some of the federal funding we've received, and President Smatresk, I wonder if you wanted to talk about the funding that's been given and anything that students might want to know right now about the future.
Well, I'm not exactly clear what someone means when they say what kind of funding is available because of COVID. What we have had is the CARES Act, and there's a portion of that CARES Act, $14.5 million, that's available for direct support of students. We've passed out around 10 million of it right now from last spring and into this summer. There'll be some additional monies that are available for the fall to support students who are financially distressed during this time. The application process through tinyurl at UNT, it's .unt, I believe, .edu, is available now. Jim, I know you're aware of that website as well. So if someone's experiencing financial distress, every semester that you're enrolled in this institution, you can apply for this funding.
Okay, thank you, Neil. One other question that a faculty or staff member wrote in had to do with what the school districts are doing in the fall as compared to what we might be doing with some starting back up. And folks are a little bit concerned about taking care of school-age children. And maybe, I don't know if you'd like to make a comment about this or talk to, maybe we ask Brandi to address it from her conversations with HR, but.
Certainly. So I would ask a couple things. If there's anyone in our community as an employee that is high risk or at risk, I do ask that you reach out to HR and discuss your different options with them. There could be some alternative options for you. But also, as we move into the fall semester, I know we're all concerned. I'm concerned as well. I think many of us are with school-age children at home. We don't always know what their school is going to look like this fall. So a lot of us are very concerned about that. What I will say is that I think the best thing for everyone to do that has those concerns is discuss it with your supervisor to find out what kind of options you have as far as teleworking, remote working, whether it's fully or partially, or changing hours or shift times and things like that. But there may be some other options as far as leave options as well. So I would ask you to reach out to HR. They can be reached at 940-565-2281. And they also have an email address, and it's hradministration@untsystem.edu. But they would definitely be able to help you talk through your concerns for the fall and possibly what options you have.
Brandi, maybe we just stay with you for a minute since you are one of the leaders of the safety committee. We've had a lot more folks writing in about the mask question. And even though it was brought up briefly, people are wanting to know more about the requirement versus not required, or when those decisions could be made. Would you like to address that in more detail?
Sure, I will definitely do my best. We are obviously monitoring this very closely. I know there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of concerns out there. We're continuing to follow the CDC guidance. There is some syllabus language that has been adopted that will allow some classrooms to make face coverings mandatory if necessary. But as far as overall, what you'll see in our guidelines is a strong recommendation to wear them. And what we do ask is, and I think about it in terms of myself, that even if, there are folks in our community that may feel that they're not at risk, or they're not maybe concerned or choose not to wear a face covering for whatever reason that may be. We want to really think about our community around us and the family that we have here at work, and to try and be helpful and help not spread the virus. So we strongly recommend the use of them. And we are working through guidelines to help with situations and circumstances where they are required around non-compliance. So Jim, I don't know if that helps, but I know there's a lot happening right now, and we're seeing some cases spike throughout the country and in our local areas.
And we'll continue to post the latest guidance, of course, on the Health Alert site and send out messages in UNT Today about that work. Let's go back to the provost to ask a question about students and in class. So one person submitted a question, Jennifer, about how will professors help the students if a student contracts COVID? I assume they mean related to continuing their coursework. And then what is our protocol going to be if a faculty member happens to get COVID when they're teaching during the semester?
Great, thank you. So for our students who are experiencing in-person classes and they become ill, we're asking them, of course, not to come to campus. If they contract COVID, then we have a process in place for making accommodations. And so what will happen is we'll have drafts. We're working on draft syllabi statements that can go into the syllabus that provides direction for faculty and students about making up exams and other kinds of activities that will be necessary. In addition, all of our general classrooms have technology that allows for students to participate via Zoom if they're home and ill and unable to participate, or in that self-isolation period. And then, of course, we'll make accommodations to be able to make up work if students are too ill to participate in class. As for instruction, all of our department chairs have been asked to come up with plans should there be a short-term need to step into a class because the faculty member has become ill.
Okay, and I just want to make a quick point that we just discovered that someone has been using inappropriate language on the chat. So we're in the process of deleting that right now as fast as we can. And I just want to remind people to please be respectful. We have faculty, staff, on, and students and parents that will be watching this as well. And please conform to our guidelines for a conversation that is appropriate. And again, we apologize, but we will delete the comments as quickly as we can. So Brandi, let's go back to you for just a minute on a safety question, and it has to do with monitoring fevers and the criteria for people monitoring and when they should call into the hotline or maybe excuse themselves from work. Do you want to address that point? I know the fever question has been discussed a lot about self-monitoring or potentially, having assistance at work in that regard.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. When the pandemic started, we had maybe 2 or 3 symptoms that we really had to monitor for. So high fever, persistent cough, and now we have many more. So we do have self-monitoring guidance out there and ask you to do that off-site before you come on campus. We do ask that if you have any of those classic symptoms of COVID or a symptom of it, that you go ahead and call your supervisor and let them know, but also call our hotline. You will be referred to someone who will be able to talk you through that situation, but we want to be mindful in the fact that you may need to counsel with someone, and that person that you speak to will be able to give you advice of what you should do next. They will ask you a lot of questions, potentially about who you've been in contact with and if you know that you've been exposed to anybody with COVID-19, but they'll do a full discussion with you, and if needed to, they'll provide you some guidance of what to do next. And they work closely, if you're a faculty or staff member, with HR. And if you're a student, they're going to work very closely with you and refer you directly to Dr. Hermann's team of the Student Health and Wellness Center, so you can get medical advice right away.
All right, thank you, Brandi. I want to address one question that came in, and it had to do with the announcement about the town hall and just communications that we're sending related to anything related to COVID or other things. For those of you who have been gone, of course, during the summer so far, but also maybe were not as active in the late spring due to the COVID situation. In May, we launched UNT Today, and that is a daily newsletter. It will be daily once the semester resumes. Right now, it's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and that goes to all faculty and staff. You do not need to subscribe to it. That contains information about these town halls, HR-related, anything else that you need to know as a faculty or staff member. So if you just look for your email every day, it's in the vicinity of 9 or 10 o'clock each morning. UNT Today will have the information about future town halls and information you need to know. Let's go back to the provost for just a minute. Jennifer, someone asked the question submitted in advance: what can a student do if they do not feel comfortable attending in-person classes? And I know I briefly touched on that earlier, but I think for people who may have joined late, maybe to go back over some of that.
Absolutely. So we have certain students who may have health conditions that really limit their ability to participate in a fully in-person schedule. If that's the case, they can reach out to their advisor and see what may be possible in terms of creating a fully remote or online schedule. So our advisors are prepared to help support our students who may have a need to be fully remote in the fall. For our students, some of them may have courses that they absolutely have to have and can only be available in person because of the nature of the instruction. We're doing everything we can to create the safest environment possible to help support our students' learning.
Okay, so there is a follow-up question in a way, Jennifer. It has to do with the academic advising. So you addressed going to class, and someone wrote in and asked how we would handle academic advisor appointments if students refuse to wear a mask or aren't abiding by the social distancing. Has that been discussed?
Yes, so we are working on social distancing plans for each of our advising offices to make clear where students should sit and stand so that we can help support our students get the advising that they need. As for guidance about how to handle situations as it relates to face coverings, our safety committee is working on guidance that will be available to help support our staff and faculty in covering the various situations that may come up. So please stay tuned. We intend to have greater guidance that will be forthcoming in the near future.
Okay, thank you. Brandi, let's go back to you for just a second. One person wrote in to ask about again, an HR related question, potentially related to workers' compensation. if they contract COVID. Has HR been working on different documents related to if someone contracts COVID, then how they file to be inactive as a staff member temporarily?
I would recommend reaching out to HR for that question specifically. I will certainly check on it as well, but I would recommend reaching out to HR, and we can definitely, for whoever the person is that answered that, if you'd like to contact me directly, we can definitely get you an answer.
All right, thank you, Brandi. We had someone write in and ask whether or not there's going to be a transcript available of the town hall, and yes, there will be. So as soon as we are able to post it, and then we'll have a transcript that's associated with it. So Dr. Hermann, I wanted to go back to you for just a minute and ask you a question related to appointments and how students would be able to come in and see you and any concerns about COVID. So do you want to cover that again, since we will have parents and students also rewatching this town hall?
Sure, of course. So right now, there are 3 different ways that students can make appointments at the Student Health and Wellness Center. 1, they can call in. Number 2, they can schedule online through our student health portal. And then the third way is they can walk in and ask for an appointment, talk with the nurse, let them know what symptoms they have going on. At each of the points, they're asked screening questions, and sometimes they're asked those screening questions multiple times. On arrival to Chestnut Hall, folks have their temperature taken. They're also given a mask if they don't have one already. If someone has a fever, or if they report yes to any of the symptoms, or if they say that they've been exposed to COVID, that person is not going to be in the reception area. They're not going to go to our front desk. They're not going to stay there waiting to be called back for the appointment. The nurse is going to come down and take the student back upstairs through our back elevator to the clinic, put them in an isolation room directly, and then the medical provider will be in and fully assess whatever issues they have going on, make the determination if they need a test or not, and then go from there.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hermann. Let's go back to Elizabeth With for just a moment. I know the president earlier showed a slide at one of the residence halls, the dining facility, but we've had a question come in sort of in mass about dining halls, dining facilities in the residence halls. So I didn't know if you'd like to maybe readdress that in more detail about some of the work that you and your team are doing on the dining facilities.
Sure. So we're working on spacing out tables and places as much as we possibly can. So from a seating perspective, that we can provide social distancing. But remember, I think I said earlier, is that we're not requiring masks in the seating area just because you can't eat with a mask on. So similar to what you see in restaurants, if you've gone out to restaurants lately. We are ensuring that there will be social distancing in place. And you saw from some of the signage that when people are in line to get their meal, or in the retail spaces, even not the dining hall, but even in the retail spaces, that there is signage on the floors that students can utilize to make sure that they are properly social distancing. We are asking that students wear their masks when they're in line as well. And we're hopeful that that's going to be helpful. We have taken away all options for self-serve in the residence halls, so students won't be able to serve themselves with condiments, with anything. All of that will be given to them, whether it's a grab and go type of a meal or whether or not it's a served meal in the dining halls. And so sanitation has been stepped up in the dining halls. You'll see a lot more cleaning that will be happening routinely as students are in there, as well as in the retail spaces in the union, trying to make sure that we're doing all that we can to help limit the spread of the disease.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Brandi, let's go back to you because there's another safety related question. This one is about the plexiglass that was discussed in the installation. Someone who apparently will be returning during the first week of July wanted to know if all of the dividers will be in place where they have identified they need to be by July the 6th.
Sure. I know that the facilities team is working diligently to get all of the plexiglass that we've been requested to installed by July 6th. What I would, because I don't know what specific area this is, if someone could reach out to myself or Dave Reynolds, who oversees facilities, we'd like to make sure that the specific question you have about your area, and let's make sure that we have all the information and we're all connected. But they are doing their best and working very diligently to get everything out as quick as possible to make sure we're ready for July 6th.
Let's keep this with you for a second, Brandi, because somebody asked about the one-way traffic in buildings and whether or not that's going to be practical. Do you have a particular answer to that one? I know that can be difficult.
This is what I will say. I know that the Facilities and Operations Advisory Group, this is a continual conversation I know they're having and they're working through. Some areas, it's a little easier to do things like this, and in many of cases, it's a little more of a struggle. So what I will say is I don't have a definite answer today about what that will look like broadly, because it could look very different in every building. But I know that they're working on it, and I know that they're having those robust discussions about how, if, when, and where could that happen.
And then also related, Brandi, is a question about accessibility and for people with disabilities. And I know that has been discussed in the safety committee. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, absolutely. And I saw some questions about the social distancing and the signage. I know it was developed, I believe, Jim, your team did a great job building it and developing it in high contrast to try and help those folks that are visually impaired. But we are having discussions around all the other types of signage and things like that. So again, while I don't have specific answers, I know we are working diligently with a couple faculty members that have reached out to help provide us with some guidance. We've also been in contact with ODA office as well as HR to talk through what are some other options, some things we could consider. So while it's not all employed just yet or out on campus, I know we're having those discussions and we're working through that. And there are a lot of really good comments and questions out there about that. So we'll be making sure that we take that back to the group to make sure that we're discussing it and that we address it as we can.
Okay, thank you, Brandi. So we've also had quite a few questions related to water fountains and other things in the buildings and how they're going to be kept safe. So I think, Brandi, since safety is such a big part of this conversation today, maybe we go back through a couple of things related to what facilities is doing related to water fountains and some of the other things where are high touch items, and maybe just cover that for a moment. Sure,
absolutely. So the water fountains, just a little bit of clarity on that. They're actually turning those off. So they're not able to be used, but leaving the other filtration devices, if it's not attached to the water fountain, on to fill bottles for bottle filling. The elevator signage I know is going up as we speak, as well as the rest of the signage across campus. Jim, what else is? I know there are other comments out there. I want to try to address those.
That's what I was trying to look at some of them, because there's been a lot of questions about the safety piece of it, especially, you know, the mask and the one-way directional signage. And I'm just trying to see if there are some here that we have not gotten to yet. What are some of the other things that you can think of from the safety committee that maybe we have not dealt with so far that might be helpful for faculty and staff and students and parents to know?
Sure. So let me think a little bit here. We've talked about, I know we've talked about the different guides that we're developing and putting out there. We've talked about the guide around for students and employees for 14 days before they come back to campus to use as a self-monitoring tool to check their temperature and symptoms before coming back to the institution. I think some of the other things that would be really important, making sure that any questions that y'all have related to leave, high risk, staying at home, whether or not you can remote work or telework, to make sure we work through that with HR. We are working on and we're just finishing up finalizing some scenario guides. I saw some questions out there about how do I know what to call, who to call when, and we hope that those guides will help guide you through that, whether you have symptoms, whether you've been in contact with someone, or whether you're just concerned. So we'll have a guide for faculty, staff, and we'll have a separate guide for students to help walk them through the different scenarios. I'm trying to think of what else that we haven't hit yet.
Brandi,
Dr. Hermann?
So one of the things that the safety group has been working on is just about every department on campus has been turning in reopening plans. And so before people come back onto campus or as they come back onto campus, they're submitting different plans that cover lots of different things that are specific to that area. So social distancing in the area, sanitizing the area, different things like that. And so each group or each department turns in this reopening plan, and then our safety group goes through all of those and makes any changes or recommendations before that goes on to the lead group to be decided on before someone comes back on campus.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hermann. Thank you, Brandi. We're just looking at some of the questions coming in to try to make certain that we can cover a majority of them. And just so everybody knows, there was a problem with the feed to YouTube. So we had a few dozen folks that were out there trying to watch. We are going to be posting this, the entire broadcast, and sending a note out to students and to parents so that they can watch it all and read the transcript. We apologize, there was a technical issue moving it from Zoom into YouTube for some reason. So that is being looked into, but unfortunately we were not able to resolve it for today. But this will be posted so everybody can watch it. So at this point, I think I'd like to move around to each of the panelists one last time and just ask them to make any closing comments. And then we can continue to answer questions offline and see what other things that people might have questions about. So let's start with the provost. Provost Cowley, do you have some closing remarks?
Absolutely. I'll just reinforce, Jim, that we are taking every step we can to focus on all of the issues that need to be thought through as we're planning for the fall. One of the topics that I saw raised a number of times was around how do we help support our faculty, students, and staff with disabilities, and how do we create the most accessible campus possible. And so I typed in one of the comments that, Jim, we're working with your team in terms of thinking about the signage and how do we make sure our students, faculty, and staff who have visual impairments are able to understand the changes that we're making on our campus. And so I'll just point that out as one of hundreds and hundreds of examples of issues that we're working through. This is a very complicated challenge that we are all committed to sorting through together. And so I know we don't have answers to everyone's questions today, but we're continuing to make progress and are committed to regular updates to our community to let you know the progress that we have made.
Thank you, Jennifer. Dr. With, do you want to close it out related to your portion of it and student affairs and the student portion?
Sure, happy to. I think I just want everybody to know that we are planning for as many scenarios as we possibly can. We want your students, we want all students to have the most robust campus experience as possible in the fall, but within the guidelines of being safe. And so know that there are numerous folks working now and late into the evenings and weekends every day, every week, doing all that we can to make sure that the facilities will be open and safe and sanitized and clean with proper signage, and that we're developing protocols and we're developing processes so that as many student groups can meet and as many activities that students want to engage in, that they have the ability to do so. We know it's important for student retention for them to be able to become connected to their campus, and we want to provide as many opportunities as possible for that.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks.
Dr. Hermann, would you like to say a few more words about the health portion?
Sure, thanks, Jim. So one thing that's important is that this is ever changing. And I think that we've all learned that lesson from when this started in late January and early February up until now. Things change, it seems like sometimes on an hourly basis. But please know that here at the Student Health and Wellness Center that we are constantly monitoring the changing guidelines and recommendations from the CDC. We also take guidance from the Texas Medical Association. There is an organization called the American College Health Association that I'm a member of that is for college health centers all across the United States. We're not isolated in dealing with some of these issues and figuring things out. And so that always helps me feel a little bit better knowing that there's other folks that are working towards the common goal that we are. I work very closely with the Denton County Health Department. I probably have at least one conversation with them a week. And so anything that we do moving forward, especially with the case investigation and contact tracing portion, it's going to be critical that we work hand in hand with them. And then lastly, Student Health and Wellness Center's main goal has always been the health and safety of our students. So we are here, we're committed to doing what we need to do to take care of folks, and we're ready to have folks back on campus and keep them safe.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hermann. And before we go to the president to close us out, Brandi, from the Safety Committee, would you like to say any final words?
Sure. I think the three of them, everybody has said things very well. And our safety advisory team, and Steve and I, on behalf of him as well, we are all working very diligently and very focused on the safety and health of our campus community as we slowly start to reopen. If there are questions that we weren't able to answer or concerns, I see some folks emailing now about plexiglass. I know that's been a lot of questions around that. Please feel free to reach out to us. As they've said, some of this feels like it's changing sometimes hour by hour, and we're doing the best we can to pretty much work around the clock to adapt and adjust and be flexible, and also to make sure that we're supporting the other advisory teams and the institution as a whole. So please feel free to reach out as necessary, and let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Brandi. Now let's go to the president and ask him if he could just close us out for today.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank everybody. Jim, great job moderating, and to all the panelists, Brandi, Cynthia, Elizabeth, Jennifer, you've done a good job, I think, trying to outline the high points. We recognize that not everyone will have their questions asked because there are 1,200 people right now in this town hall, a good turnout and indicative of the interest that everyone has in the topic. I think that what's critical here is that we are adapting to news on a nearly daily basis. I've heard major concerns around masks and mask usage. I will tell you that I feel we're moving progressively towards a required mask policy. However, enforcement is very, very challenging, and no one, I'm in communication with 30 to 40 presidents every week. No one yet has an answer to that, especially when that may fly in the face of certain other mandates or executive orders out of our governor's office. So we're working very diligently to try to come up with progressive, educationally satisfactory, and caring approaches to how we get and how we interact as a community to keep ourselves safe and to make sure that we can continue with the important mission of educating the students who come here. And I can't emphasize that enough. There were a lot of also concerns about telecommuting and rotations. And while we haven't settled on any of those as a university-wide policy, it's pretty obvious that some units will be more engaged and some units will be able to continue greater amounts of telecommuting. If you're working in the physical plant, telecommuting doesn't work very well. If you're working in the finance section, telecommuting may continue to be very strong options for us. We will not overload office spaces. We will not overload shared spaces. And we will be committed to making sure that whatever happens allows for a great deal of feedback between our employees, our faculty, and our students to make sure that we're doing the best job possible. And I'm confident that I've seen incredible coming together as a community. I've seen really creative solutions to the different problems and challenges that we have. And I know that if we continue to care and respect each other, that we'll be able to move through this as well or better than any other institution in the country. And that's what we're shooting for. We're shooting to be an exemplar of how to do this, do it right, and make sure that people still get the kinds of on-campus experiences that they really want to have. So I hope I've addressed most of your questions. I noticed there were some questions about football. I really won't be able to answer those very directly, other than we will have football provided that there aren't challenges with COVID in the athletics groups, and that we have right now no particular solid plans about how we're going to populate the stadium. Next time we'll have to bring Ren Baker back so he can talk to you a little bit more about how we can do larger scale events still safely and make sure that we're being considerate of everyone. With that, I hope that you've learned a little bit today. I hope that we've answered a lot of your questions. I know that the transcript of this will be available and the Q&A questions will be done. We've been doing them with every town hall. We've been making those transcripts available so that people can review them. With that, I want to thank again everybody who took the time to come here. And I know that working together, we're going to be strong. We're going to be socially responsible. We're going to take care of our Mean Green family. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. And with that, our town hall on safety and reopening comes to an end, and we will keep you updated on the latest, again, for UNT Today and other communications, and potentially through another gathering like this down the road. Thank you for joining us.